Hello, gamers, and welcome to the second episode of the Stray Pixels podcast. I'm your host, Colin, and I'm joined once again by my co-hosts, Noisy Pixel content writer Nathan Mejia, and our editor-in-chief, Bailey.
Heyo.
So, we wanted to have like a fun, cool episode this week about whatever we wanted to, but those plans were kind of nuked by the biggest gaming news of the year, probably. You all already know what it is. There's going to be a joke about it in the title of the podcast. So I'm going to rip off the Band-Aid now. And we are yet another podcast discussing the purchase of Activision Blizzard for $68.7 million by Microsoft.
Let's say 69.
Just because it's so nice.
Yeah.
It's a nice
just for the meme
round number.
Most places I've seen are just rounding it up to 70, which fair enough, but also 69.
Yeah.
I mean, you gotta get the magic sex number in it.
So the elephant in the room here is obviously Activision Blizzard's been having a pretty rough go of it. They had a pretty bad 2021 that was clearly preceded internally by a pretty shitty preceding 30 years, especially at Blizzard, and especially if you were a woman. So I want to know what your guys' initial thoughts were when you saw the news, because I think that all of us were kind of discussing it in our server, but what was your first thought when you actually saw Microsoft buying Activision Blizzard?
I'll go here first. My first initial gut reaction was, am I gonna have to boycott Microsoft now? Like, is this safe?
Fair enough.
Because I was like, what does this even mean? What does this even entail? Is Bobby Kotick even going to be a part of the system anymore? Is he just going to be a lower level? Because that's what happens in a lot of these acquisitions, is the CEO steps down to a lower position, but they oversee it still. And then my second thing was, does this mean I'm getting a WoW subscription now on my Game Pass?
We'll talk about it.
Yeah,
we will absolutely talk about that. Bailey, what about you?
So like this news was like kind of part of a whole bombardment of random stuff. So the night prior to this acquisition being announced, there was a bunch of like Kingdom Hearts stuff being announced, and I was like writing up. I was like up at like 3 o'clock in the morning. A lot of random stuff.
Bailey doesn't sleep. Happened. Bailey just plays Kingdom Hearts 3 all night.
Yeah. That's what I do. Then I go to sleep. I wake up, and then I see, oh shit, this is actually, I guess there's still news happening now. And like, I didn't really know what to make of it at first because I don't really follow Activision stuff, but like, I'm not really, I don't know, I find it kind of worrisome because I think it's kind of creating a pretty scary precedent. Like, I just don't think purchases this massive should be made regardless of the reasoning. I don't know, I just think it's a little bit of a mess, but yeah, we'll see.
That's totally fair. And that was kind of one of like the big things with this news was like, we got this story broke first thing in the morning. So I literally woke up, and before I had gotten out of bed, I saw this trending on Twitter, which tells you that I check Twitter before I get out of bed. And that's really sad, but that's besides the point. So, and then I had to go to my day job immediately. Like, so I was just kind of like, my head was reeling about it all day. And I was like trying to explain to people who were like, Colin, you look a little bit off today. Like, is something going on? And I'm like, well, this thing happened.
It's Chucky, man. It's
like,
so hard.
The casual person knows what Call of Duty is. And I know I have a lot of friends, at my day job that play some variety of video games, but a lot of them aren't like the Call of Duty crowd, really. So a lot of them were just like, oh, I mean, who cares? I just play Genshin Impact, or I just play Nintendo, or stuff like that. So I was having a hard time, like, finding someone to have just like a discussion with that I could just explain why my head was so swimming, because just the implications, my brain was going wild. And the first thing that my actual first concrete thought was, if Phil Spencer says the words Call of Duty Xbox exclusive, the PlayStation as a casual gaming platform is dead. Just dead. There are so many gamers out there who just buy Call of Duty and NBA 2K every year.
I always kind of like attributed Call of Duty to PlayStation as well, because like I always see all these like promotions, like the recent Attack on Titan one. That's kind of weird.
So like, Call of Duty has had, since I think the PS3 days, a long-standing partnership with Sony, where Sony would get either exclusive or timed exclusive content for Call of Duty every year, which is kind of interesting to think about, because a lot of people who like are in this space usually see Xbox as the more casual platform of the two, especially since like last generation, basically what Xbox had was like their big tentpole titles and then the stuff that was multi-platform, and most of that was geared towards geared towards a casual market. So just like, and you know, to clarify, Spencer himself has said we want to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, so that fear was allayed pretty quickly. But just the thought that that decision rests in the hands of a company who is very clearly willing to lose a lot of money in the short term, that's kind of scary.
They could just they could change that if they want to at any point.
Yep.
Because nobody can say it and going off about it. Like Microsoft recently, especially with their new CEO, as the conglomerate as a whole, has been very competition friendly, like surprisingly so. You know, Microsoft famously wanted to open the floodgates for cross-console play, and with this happening, Sony can still stop it, but now they can very easily mandate, hey, no, Call of Duty, you know, on Xbox and PC, you know, can coexist. I don't know how good that will be, but
what I'm kind of expecting out of that is, so they mentioned in some of the statements following that Activision and Sony have existing contracts. I'm assuming that the deal for PlayStation content for Call of Duty just was slated to last X number of years. I don't know how many, but my assumption is it was just going to last this many years and there would be this many titles, which is easy to predict because that's the same number. But after that, and this isn't necessarily a fully original take, this is something that I've heard bouncing around, is after that, it would be fully within Microsoft and Activision's best interest to kind of make some demands of Sony to keep Call of Duty on their platform, because obviously Sony wants Call of Duty on their platform. It is the highest selling PlayStation franchise, and it has been for years, like generations even. So like they could easily go, okay, so we want to keep Call of Duty on PlayStation, but it has to be crossplay, or we're not doing it anymore. Like,
and Sony's not really cross-play friendly either, so it's gonna be a really...
So getting Sony last generation to embrace crossplay was, oh my god, they had to be dragged kicking and screaming into it, and a lot of that was being done by Epic, who then, you know, went and made asses of themselves in a completely different and legal situation that is still technically ongoing. But, you know, there were a lot of people that were looking at the situation and being like, well, why can't I play Call of Duty with my friends that just are playing it on a different box? Because casuals, they don't necessarily always understand. A lot of them just know, oh, I just have to buy Call of Duty and I have to buy another year of gold and then I'm good for a while. Because there's you know, tons of people that play Call of Duty all year. And I don't even want to just say Call of Duty, because, you know, there's a whole bunch of other IPs and franchises and stuff. I saw some humorous observations that Doom, Wolfenstein, and Hexen are now all part of the same, are now all owned by the same parent company again, just like in the 90s.
That's so crazy.
I mean, they got the people who created the first-person shooter, Bethesda,
man. Our favorite.
Yeah, our favorite. I mean, Tom Howard, man, contact me, man.
It's like I never really thought about Microsoft's like what studios they own for a while, but like now that I'm thinking, like Bethesda,
big umbrella now.
Alone, that was like a pretty wild one alone. But like, even like this is like I still can't even like properly like fathom.
It's a lot. Microsoft has fuck you money to throw around, and they have been throwing it around. Like, one of the things that I kind of was thinking about was the comparison to Epic's like really aggressive push of the Epic Game Store, where they were literally throwing money at publishers to get exclusive games.
Yeah, and they're still doing that still. Yeah,
this is like, and this is a pretty valid comparison now, because the yes, Sony is also making acquisitions, but it's making acquisitions with companies that have worked with Sony very closely for years, if not decades. Like, they just bought Bluepoint. When was the last, like, Bluepoint has been making remakes for Sony for 2 generations now. So this is kind of like, you know, we thought that them buying ZeniMax was unprecedented. This is literally like exponentially bigger than that.
This was, and the implications even with Bethesda, like Bethesda's acquisition was big in the Western RPG community. Like, you know, people like me were like, what does this mean? You know, next Elder Scrolls. Is that going to be exclusive? Next Skyrim, because, you know, there's going to be another Skyrim.
And then the answer was yes. The Elder Scrolls 6 and Starfield are both coming to Xbox exclusively, Xbox and PC. They will not appear on PlayStation platform. And even like higher level executives were like, we're sorry, but this was part of the deal. Like,
what's Sony gonna do?
A lot of people are saying Sony might start making waves in their own acquisitions, which I think we've like, touched on it. Makes
like,
very
I
bad
guess
precedent.
they can, but like they can't like match, like, at least with like quantity wise, they can't match what the hell happened here. You know, like
Sony being a Japanese company and PlayStation being the moneymaker for Sony, like their gaming division is what makes the company money these days. Making big purchases of this scale would be an absolutely enormous risk to them that I don't necessarily see paying off in the short enough term that they would consider it.
It's also a pretty like rocky road for them, because even with Japanese like audiences and that whole market, they haven't really been in their good graces for the past like generation or so, because of the censorship and the and also because of how big the Switch is, and like Japan like has been overtaking
there are more Switches in Japan in the wild than there are PlayStation 4s. So but what kind of, like, I think the big thing that this is going to get cut, this little bit right here, this is what he was talking about. The thing that everybody has kind of been discussing is, obviously we've mentioned it, the situation with Bobby Kotick. So I'm sure pretty much all of you know, but as a quick refresher, yes, Blizzard, as it turns out, has been a pretty deep cesspit of really toxic company culture for basically the entire time that it's existed. But with Bobby Kotick, obviously he owns like Activision. He doesn't just own Blizzard, and he didn't come up with Blizzard, but Kotick himself has been implicated in several extremely high level sexual harassment cases. And that's not something that we've really necessarily seen happen before. Like J. Allen Brack, before he left Blizzard, wasn't being personally accused. Randy Pitchford has never been, to my knowledge, personally accused of that. He's been, you know, demonstrably guilty of other weird, creepy behavior. But as far as we know, he hasn't been accused of that. Only other CEO that I can think of that has faced this kind of scrutiny is Yves Guillemot at Ubisoft. That's a whole other can of worms that we don't really have time to get into today. But there's been kind of conflicting reports about whether Kotick is staying. And over the course of the last week, we've seen some reports saying, oh, he's probably going. We've seen some reports saying, oh, he's scheduled to stay on for the foreseeable future. We don't know if that means until this deal is closed, because it's going to take a while before it's like actually like done. Or is Is he going to like be forced to step down? Is he going to be moved to a different position in the company? And it seems to me that the most likely outcome of this is he gets to leave with a golden parachute. As terrible as that is, I'm sure some of those $69 billion are going directly into his pocket.
They are, and he's more likely probably not going to have any more say inside the company, but I wouldn't be surprised to see him in shareholding meetings and stuff like that. Which shareholders are notoriously, they don't actually do anything, but they just make a lot of money off
they
of
want the line
nothing.
to go up.
Yep, they are the epitome of stonks.
Yep.
So he would still make money off of it, which people would still find issue with, and that's why there is so much like my discussion of what do we do? Is this any better? Is this any worse? From that point, I have a big relationship with Activision Blizzard. Not so much Activision side, although I think they did publish some Tony Hawk games or something.
I think so.
I'm fond of. But with Crash Bandicoot and Spyro, which are now owned by Microsoft.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
Oh god.
And for a while those were big Sony mascots, but because of trade deals, they weren't actually owned by Sony, owned by Universal and all that stuff. They have now lost any right to those characters. And that's kind of weird and scary to think of. I don't think they're ever going to not but in multi-platform, because I don't think Spyro or Crash make as much money.
I don't see them being Xbox only. It's a little weird.
I disagree.
Really?
Oh.
I disagree on that. Specifically because they don't make a ton of money. I think that is the kind of thing. So Call of Duty is going to remain multi-platform because it sells tens of millions of copies, guaranteed reliably. And why deprive yourself of all the copies that could be bought on PlayStation 5 when that number is so high?
Yeah.
But Crash 4, which obviously is just our most recent, example, underperformed pretty solidly. I believe it was like maybe the 10th best selling game of the month that it came out, and it disappeared off of the charts the following month. So as sucky as that is, I think that is a sign that if we do get more of like our old 90s mascot platformers from these companies, especially because Toys for Bob is now owned under that umbrella, I think that they will be used to promote Game Pass. I think that it's likely that Microsoft will not think that there is enough money to be made by putting them on PlayStation platforms to justify doing so. And I think that with the sorry, I'm tripping over my words. It's been mentioned in the last couple of days before we recorded that Phil Spencer himself actually is interested in seeing several properties potentially revived. Some of them I'm not really sure how he would go about doing, because one of them was Guitar Hero.
Guitar Hero?
I would love for Guitar Hero to come back, but I don't really know how you get away with that, because like you need to buy the big plastic instrument, and I have many big plastic instruments for these games, but like you can't really play it without that. And the last time that they tried to revive Guitar Hero was the weird live one that changed up the guitar, and no one bought it. Like I think I literally got my copy of it for $20 at Toys R Us, not even a full year after it came out. So I don't know how he's going to go about doing that, but I think that Microsoft is probably going to be more willing to push a lot of these companies that have gotten caught up in the Call of Duty machine to make more of these smaller middle card titles like Crash 4, like Spyro Reignited, because quantity is so important for Microsoft's current business model, as opposed to Sony, who can just put out a massive game, every 2-3 months, and it'll sell 7, 10, 13 million copies, and that's money in the bank for them. And Microsoft's business model, we're gonna get into in the second half. I don't want to go too much further on that, but Bailey, I want to know if you had any takes on Kotick in this whole mess.
I mean, you pretty much just said all that I kind of thought about it. Just like, it's really freaking terrible. Like, I don't really agree with. I don't know. It's just like the whole thing just kind of rubs me the wrong way. Just like the whole acquisition, him in general. Just like, I just don't think it was. I don't know. Like, I think so. Like, a kind of like pattern I kind of began to notice is that it feels like every generation, like the general like power of which console or like which like company is doing better kind of like shifts. So like PS3 was like very like shaky, and Microsoft was doing, I would say, far better then.
Yeah, like literally up until the end of the console generation, PS3 overtook Xbox 360 at the last second.
Yeah. And then for PS4, that kind of shifted the other way around, and then now it's back to this, and it's just kind of like, I kind of like the idea of this happening, because I feel like it's going to kind of make Sony have to reevaluate and like change some of their strategies, which kind of been. We
talked about last week.
There's a lot they could do better, but I feel like the scale is just too high. I just feel like it's going to cause more harm in the long run, but we'll see what happens.
Yeah, the only thing that I could think of that would like potentially change more than this would be a Take-Two acquisition, which I'm hoping that that's off the table, because for one of the console manufacturers to own NBA 2K and Grand Theft Auto, that would put a
probably be like
equal
equal in scale to like
Well,
Microsoft.
So it's not. So NBA 2K, I think, is pretty up there in terms of scale with Call of Duty. Grand Theft Auto, though, like they just make a game now. They just make a game every 10 years, and it like sells and makes billions of dollars. I think like hasn't GTA 5 made like several hundred $1 billion at this point? I'm probably pulling that number out of my butt, but like you get what I mean.
No, it's really huge because of the online portion, which all those shark cards and all that stuff really adds up for them. So much so that's why GTA 5 is the next Skyrim joke is coming up, because they only benefit from just putting that out over and over and over again. And they tried to do the same thing with Red Dead Online, and that kind of failed.
Wow.
Yeah, and I think Rockstar as a company is a little overvalued. They're very good at what they do, but they're a little overvalued for what they are. Because Take-Two would be good, and all that Grand Theft Auto money would be good, but I think Sony would find more success going the indie route.
It is kind of interesting to think about, because when Sony because when they bought Insomniac, that was, I forgot the exact value that was, but it was very it's like small potatoes, but they've garnered a very drastic amount of success from that acquisition. So if it's more about making smart buys, I guess.
Yeah,
it's kind of underdog versus versus how Microsoft is now, because they don't have to really think about what they're buying, I guess, when they have something that big.
Yeah.
For the record, we're about to take a break and move on, but I do want to just off the back of that topic, because this is a thing that has been bandied about for a bit now. I don't see either Square Enix or Sega being open to a complete buyout. I don't see that for either of them. Square Enix, I think, is too complex, really, because it's literally split into two massively different larger companies, because they've got the European division and the Japanese division, and the two companies operate so differently. And Sega, I don't see it for.
Sega's not gonna
no. Sega is way too confident in what they do already, so they don't have a need to sell.
But anyway, we are going to take a quick ad break here, and then we will come back and discuss the other topic on everyone's minds regarding this purchase, which is Game Pass. So grab yourselves a drink and we'll be right back. And welcome back to the second episode of the Stray Pixels podcast. So in our first half, we discussed the buyout of Activision Blizzard by Microsoft. And in the second half, we're going to be talking about what that means for Game Pass and Game Pass as a whole, because ultimately that is why this acquisition happened to begin with. And Game Pass is in kind of a scary position right now, despite its success. So at the same time, or rather on the same day that the announcement was made about the acquisition, Microsoft also announced that Game Pass had hit 25 million active subscribers. And that sounds like a lot of people and a lot of money coming in. But we heard about this on the day that, we heard that they had just dropped $69 billion to acquire a company, basically specifically to get their games for Game Pass. And you also have to consider that Game Pass technically costs $10 a month, but ever since it started, there have been ways to get it for much less than that. So the most obvious take here is that this probably means that Activision games are going to be day and date on Game Pass, because that seems to be what Microsoft has pushed everything to, which is kind of interesting, because that means that Call of Duty now goes into the same realm as a whole bunch of other properties that are now kind of almost free to play, which is interesting because there already exists a Call of Duty free to play game.
Yeah.
Because we have Warzone, but now we're going to have the actual big bread and butter games probably launching on Game Pass, if not just their multiplayer, because I could see them like separating out the campaigns if they still want to make them. But obviously the multiplayer is where all the money is. So what everybody kind of wants to know beyond that is, what does this mean for games like Overwatch and World of Warcraft that have been on the downslope for a while now, due to droughts of content for both of them and, the management of the company that makes them. So, Nate, you kind of brought this up before. What are your thoughts on what might be coming to Game Pass in the near future with this acquisition?
So with it, I think Overwatch will be a sure bringer. In fact, I could see them because with a Game Pass, I am a Game Pass Ultimate subscriber, and you get offered little trinkets and little side thing like, oh, here, have this special skin for this game. Go have a little extra, whatever currency for the other game. So I could see them kind of bringing up that and trying to bring the user base back together kind of under the Microsoft banner with the Game Pass. And that'll help bring in, more people who kind of look at Overwatch, go, oh yeah, that looks fun, but I wouldn't pay $30-$40 for it. I still honestly believe Overwatch should have maybe gone the free-to-play route. And with Warcraft, I was a big Warcraft fan. Huge. I spent years of my life playing Warcraft for the Horde specifically. And it kind of hurt when I saw how bad it was going. And I got out around Cataclysm just before Mist of Pandaria. Because I tried to get into it, because the biggest thing about Mist of Pandaria was, oh my God, pandas are going to be neutral. They can join either faction or just stay out of it completely.
Out of context, that's really funny.
Yeah.
Pandas are neutral.
Pandas are neutral. And it was really kind of saddening to hear that, Warcraft, instead of being a major leader in the MMO genre, had now been following the leader with Final Fantasy XIV, who, I love Final Fantasy XIV. And, well, I'm happy for that game. I always hate to see other games fail or falter because of it. Or,
It's kind of interesting because a lot of people are thinking that World of Warcraft subscription might now be rolled into someone's Game Pass subscription, which would make the game cheaper because World of Warcraft has maintained a $14.99 monthly subscription plan since its launch, and Game Pass technically only costs $10 a month if you only play it on one system, either the Xbox or the PC, and $15 for the Ultimate that includes Xbox Live Gold. So that would kind of be interesting. Like that could theoretically, if a bunch of people start playing it, overtake Final Fantasy 14 again. That's like, that would be kind of a pretty major move in that space. Bailey, do you have any thoughts on this? As someone that has, mixed to negative feelings on MMOs.
I guess in this context, it's kind of cool, like to see to just imagine the prospect of these not I think fails kind of an exaggeration, but like these games have gone downhill, kind of reinvigorate them with some new life,
Mm-hmm.
I think that would probably do everyone some good. So I'm not really opposed to that idea.
And it's kind of interesting to consider that so Microsoft last generation basically announced we're not reporting on our console sales anymore. We don't know ultimately how many Xbox Ones were sold, because once we hit the point where it was literally only half as many PS4s had been sold, they basically just were like, this is only bringing our stock price down every time we talk about it. But what they do talk about is, hey, we've just gained X million subscribers to our services, because that's ultimately the thing that they're pushing right now. Yeah. So it's kind of interesting that World of Warcraft did something pretty similar, where they stopped a couple expansions ago. They stopped actively publishing their subscriber counts because they were trending downwards so frequently. And I do kind of wonder, will this make them spike back up, or has the game gotten too much bad press at this point to even entice people on Game Pass, especially considering that if you're just now getting into Game Pass, or even just getting all the games that are going to come with this acquisition, it's one game that's going to take a lot of time versus a lot of other games that are suddenly about to drop on this platform. And I also think that it's kind of, sorry, my brain is spinning. But I also think that in terms of a loss leader, it's kind of interesting to think that your World of Warcraft subscription might go away, because that is ultimately, I think, the thing that's keeping Blizzard together at this point, is that they still have these millions of active subscribers and all of the money that they put into the cash shop. So without that, what money is Blizzard making when they're not launching new titles? Because you're not getting, a ton of new people coming into World of Warcraft with every expansion. You're getting the same people that quit playing because of the content drought. They come back for 2 months and then they leave again. Yeah. So I don't really know what money that could possibly make for Game Pass. And Game Pass, like I said, is in kind of a scarier position than Microsoft wants to admit, because it is not profitable, and it is not going to be for a while. They'll need multiple times as many people as they have now subscribing to it, especially now, to actually turn a profit on all these acquisitions they've been making. So that's kind of the scary part of the way that Game Pass functions right now, is my fear that it's kind of a bubble, and it we're kind of heading towards, I think, potentially, I don't want to fearmonger, but a mini crash like we saw in 1987, where there's so many games being put out, but they're so accessible, but they're not making money for the companies that are making them. And Microsoft is going to have to start chopping eventually.
Or they could just make the service more, either or.
Yeah.
But making the service more also then leads people to unsubscribe.
Yeah, it's gonna.
So it's kind of a huge risk for them to do that. Bailey, do you have any thoughts on the way that they've been buying up these developers and kind of using them just to bolster Game Pass?
I'm not really the biggest fan. Well, on a personal note, I'm not really the biggest fan of Game Pass, and it's I don't really I don't hate it, but it's just I I feel like there's the issue of like too much like choice, and then also the possibility of like, because like everything has their own individual drop off date from like the whole service.
Yeah.
So like I feel like with this whole acquisition now, it's gonna get even like, what are you gonna play? Like there's gonna be so much to choose from, and I don't know if that's exactly a good thing. Like I think it's kind of the opposite, like of the entirely opposite spectrum of the Switch online service, like how it's like a very, very like gradual, you know, like a few titles like here and there every few months, as opposed to Game Pass where it's like freaking God knows
like 20
how many
more titles every month just getting added
like,
to it, and eventually they do leave, but like it's kind of daunting. Like I actually remember I've had Game Pass for PC in the past, but I was a PlayStation Now subscriber for a while, and I remember like seeing the list of what was available right away when I first subscribed, and I was like, what do I play? What do I play first? What do I play after that?
Like it's also kind of the problem where, well, like it's not really, so like this is like very like specific to the type of game that's on a Game Pass, but like for example, like Yakuza and Kingdom Hearts, like you have these like franchise like games on there, and then when you just get like one or like two of them off as opposed to like the entirety of the series, it gets kind of weird to like keep playing them on that service, you know, like there's like a rumor that the Yakuza games are going to leave the service now, you know, and it's kind of like for people who really want to get into Yakuza, you know, and they see that like rumor or like that news like I'm going around, like it kind of depends on how much they want the service like just for those games, but like it's just like I think just like there's like too many games to keep track of for like when they go out, you know, like it's just like a whole mess right now, I think.
Sure. I mean, Nate, you you are the one of us that has an Xbox and I believe also Game Pass. So do you have like anything to counter this point?
I get what you're talking about with the too many games on there, because I remember when I first booted up my Xbox, when I got it, because I had actually gotten they call it Access Now.
Oh, the All Access, yeah.
Yes, the All Access, because that was actually like you can get an Xbox right now through like Walmart or something.
Yeah, they have it at Target too.
The issue is that it is going to be $800 because you're buying 2 years Game Pass with it.
Wait, what? It's how much?
So Xbox All Access, real quick, because this isn't a thing that they talk about a lot, but it is the thing that you see advertised in some places. It's effectively a system where Microsoft will let you lease your console. So you get the box now, but you're paying a monthly fee for both the box and eventually, once you've paid it off, 2 full years of Game Pass Ultimate, basically.
Okay.
So it's kind of it was basically implemented in the Xbox One era to get more people to like kind of impulse buy, honestly, because they were just desperate to sell Xbox Ones, and Game Pass was their big selling point starting last generation. So it was kind of a marriage of those two like needs for the company, and it's been a thing for a minute. I don't know very many people that have used it besides Nate, but I did see a lot of people kind of clowning on the idea that you were leasing your console the way you lease a car. Because like it's an idea that we haven't really seen in the space before. And it's like, well, what kind of console is going to require a credit check before I can buy it?
Yeah. I mean, it is kind of like that, but it's not as bad. It's about like, you're honestly getting a credit card with a limit of like whatever the Xbox costs with Citizens Bank, and I pay like $30 a month. Like it's really like, oh, instead of getting out to eat one day, I'm paying a bill of $30 a month for this Xbox, whereas it was like pay $800 in some cases for just the Xbox.
Oh yeah, if you were buying it from a scalper, for sure.
Yeah. And I was like, you know what? I've heard things about Game Pass. I heard it has all these games. Why not? What's the big deal? When I first booted that up and put it up, I was like, oh my God, there's so much stuff on here. I'm gonna do first. And then I was like, well, let's go ahead and see what I've already played, So Evil Within, stuff like that, it was already there. A lot of the Bethesda stuff, I don't need to really sit down and be like, oh, I need to play this on Game Pass.
I don't need to play another 100 hours of Skyrim.
I will, but not on Game Pass.
Oh man, Nate loves Skyrim, man.
Yeah, man. I bought that Legendary Edition, and
I can't
now
believe you got that.
Hey man, I own Skyrim.
Wait, the Legendary
PC.
or the Anniversary Edition?
Oh, Anniversary.
Okay, I was like, the Legendary was from
It's
from
the
the
one
7th
that,
generation.
The one that added fishing, I think, right?
Yeah.
Fishing.
It added fishing and survival mode and camping. Can't forget that, man.
Oh my god, it's so stupid. I guess like sorry to cut you off, Nate.
No,
I guess like one question I kind of have now is like, how many more people are going to be interested in buying an Xbox now? Like, because like even I'm like, Xbox Series S, I don't know, man. It's kind of tempting. I don't know.
Yeah.
And like that's a valid concern, but like that question can be read two ways. Is like how many people that don't already have this thing can be persuaded to buy it? Because like the thing is that in order for Game Pass to turn a profit, they're going to have to appeal to an absurdly broad number of people. And that's why last generation you saw Microsoft publicly coming out and being like, yeah, we'd love to put Game Pass on Switch and PlayStation 4, because it kind of needs to be like, unless they can have like a record-breaking console generation, this is not going to turn a profit before we get whatever comes after the Series S and the Series X, assuming that something does come after.
Yeah.
So
people are forgetting that with Game Pass Ultimate, EA Play is also on that.
Mm-hmm.
So you get all of these EA games as well, which Sims 4, Mass Effect, especially that Legendary Edition.
Thing that's kind of a caveat to that though is that EA Play doesn't tend to include like anything beyond the base games. So like for example, yes, you can play The Sims 4 on it, but it's only the base game, as opposed to Game Pass seems to want to push like everything. And it's kind of like it's a little bit different the way that they do it, but
I did so like on like a separate server I'm on, like some of my friends were like talking about this, and like one of them was talking about how it feels like Xbox has no clear like identity or like goal in mind, or like with like how people like see them, like because if you think about PlayStation now, it's like, oh, like Spider-Man, Horizon, like God of War, like these like very identifiable games, whereas with Xbox, like I don't know how they want to be seen as, like I don't know what kind of identity they want to like make for themselves now.
So if I can like kind of hazard a guess as to the answer to that. So Sony over the last two generations, basically since the success of Uncharted and then The Last of Us, Sony has placed a massive emphasis on, we're the company that wants to deliver you like huge budget single player experiences. We will make our money that way, and we're going to continue making sure that these kinds of video game experiences are like continuing to be produced, because the industry was at that point starting to really push back, because single player games are less easily remonetizable. Basically, like, unless you stuff the single player story mode of your game with microtransactions, it is much harder to keep people spending on a game they've already dropped money on. And that is just how the video game industry works now, as shitty as that is. So Sony kind of coming out and being like, yeah, no, we're going to make game after game. We're going to make God of War. We're going to make Spider-Man. We're going to make Horizon Zero Dawn. And these are all going to be like, if not solely, then primarily single player experiences. And I think that Xbox, pretty early into the original generation, into the sixth generation, was like, we have Halo, and we're going to make that a core part of our brand. So Halo 2's multiplayer was the thing that I think ultimately made Xbox as a brand succeed, because otherwise it was kind of just the more expensive PS2 with the bigger controller. Like you'd see most of the same games on it, but I think that was when it finally got an identity, was when they pushed online multiplayer to a degree that no one had seen before in the console space before anybody else did. So I think that that has kind of stuck with them, and that's why last year we saw Halo Infinite's multiplayer be launched for free, like almost out of nowhere. And it just blew up. It became hugely successful. So I think that Microsoft is still kind of banking on the fact that they can keep pushing out these multiplayer experiences. And that's kind of something that Sony is currently trying to fill in their own gap for, honestly, because Microsoft at this point isn't quite doing single player tent poles. Like they have them, but they're not being emphasized, and they're all from franchises that are also famous for multiplayer. You have Halo, you have Gears, and you have Forza. And so that's why we have Sony right now being more aggressive in their push to get their developers making multiplayer games, which is one of the reasons why The Last of Us Factions has been delayed, and we're now like 2 years past the actual launch of The Last of Us 2, and it still hasn't happened, because they want it when it comes out to be huge, because that's the last thing that Microsoft really like actually has over them in terms of a broader market appeal. So I think that Xbox has an identity, but I think that it's kind of hard for them to maintain it, because a lot of these multiplayer games, they keep their communities around, like they keep pretty dedicated communities, but they're not like cultural like tent poles the way that a lot of Sony games are now. Which is kind of part of the quantity over quality thing that we're talking about with Game Pass, is they have to keep pushing new stuff out. I like, my theory last generation was that Game Pass and the backwards compatibility push were to fill in all the holes for the games that Microsoft didn't have over Sony, because they had, Xbox has no games was the big joke of the last gen. So we're kind of seeing this inflating bubble ripple out from that I kind of think has to pop. Do you guys have any thoughts on?
I have quite a bit of thoughts, because I do agree. I actually want to even say this bubble has been forming since the PS3, Xbox 360 days, because of, that's when we started seeing these ballooning 30-hour games, 40-hour games, 60-hour games, 80-hour games. I mean, Dying Light 2 recently, 500 hours to do everything.
500 hours.
They later clarified,
and then we all wanted
80.
to die.
Yeah, and they later clarified it's 80 to do all the side quests and quests. The 500 comes from all the little, objectives, like go find this, go find that, stuff like that. But these games are not sustainable. Dying Light, while it looks amazing when I see it on advertisements and all that stuff, that game is not feasible. It's the reason why it took so long for that game to come out, because it just ballooned and it ballooned and it ballooned.
The scope of it just kept getting bigger.
Yeah, and in the tech world, scope creep is a killer. It is a killer, and I don't know why game developers, particularly the companies themselves and the publishers, the CEOs, keep pushing these bigger ideas, like, oh no, it has to be bigger, it has to be even bigger, it has to be even bigger, when in reality there should have, I think the issue is that game companies are more divided between the developers and the business side, because as a professional programmer, we have intermediaries, we have business analysts, we have product owners whose job is literally to listen to the shareholders, the business side, be like, hey, no, we can't do that. That is not within scope. That would balloon the scope to this. This would need 6 more months of development time. Well, instead with game development, it's, oh, you didn't hit your milestone, you're not getting paid. I recently, I hate calling out other things, but I recently watched a video on YouTube about 13.
The what happened that went up the same day that we're recording this.
Yes.
Well, just let Nate talk.
Sorry. But yeah, and the whole thing was that they didn't hit their milestone. They didn't get paid. Everything with game development is in this huge entire bubble. And I became a programmer is because I wanted to become a game developer. It was a dream since I was 12 when I first played Pokemon Blue. Was I wanted to make these experiences for other people, and then getting into it and starting to see it, and I was like, no, I can't dedicate 18-20 hours of my life how some of these developers are, where they're sleeping in the office. They're coding stuff. Milestones are changing. Their product leader is literally sitting there going, yeah, we can do that, just because they can get more money in
the No Man's Sky conundrum, basically.
Yeah. And
is the big famous example of this.
That is the big famous example. With that, I will say Sean Murray is a very awkward person. You could just see it.
Yeah.
He didn't know what he was saying.
No, but it's like it is a thing that we see over and over again, where like as the boxes have changed, frankly, games have just gotten so much more expensive to develop, and this is partly on the developers for saying, hey, we want to make games that are bigger of this scope, where I will say that I've had new gen experiences that weren't huge in scope, like Astro's Playroom wasn't like a massive game, but it felt like I was playing a next gen video game. But that's kind of a thing with Game Pass is especially when you have all of these games that are going to take dozens of hours to complete. I think that even more adds to like someone's choice paralysis in terms of what they're going to do and what they're going to get out of it. And I'm not saying that it's a bad value, even considering that, at least to the consumer, but I do think that, and this kind of ties in with what you were saying, I had this thought around the time that Gears of 5 came out, that having your games go up day and date on Game Pass, I don't think it's good for developer morale, frankly. I think that, especially since at that time you could feasibly get Game Pass for like $2 a month, I think that Gears 5 coming out and effectively costing Xbox owners $2 to play, like that's got to be pretty devastating to someone who spent all this time and potentially all these crunch hours making the thing. That would just get people burned out. And I think that I don't necessarily think that Microsoft is going to be pushing people to the point of burnout to the degree that they might have been beforehand. I think that Microsoft obviously has a big job to do in terms of reforming the way that things are being done at Activision Blizzard King, but it's a discussion to be had because there's so many other huge developers where it's still happening. And they don't all have a company that's going to come in and sweep in and take them over and then change things. Like the big one's Naughty Dog. Naughty Dog was taken over by Sony, and then Sony was just like, here, Neil Druckmann, continue running this company however you want to. And that's how you get crunch.
That's how you get there's too much. The issue is that we also treat certain game designers like Kojima, these things, as celebrities themselves. So Neil Druckmann was a big face of the company, and Sony's sorry, something popped up. Sony's model was, hey, we're not going to interfere, which normally is good. We like to hear that, because usually the main developer or the game designer should be also in the trenches. A game designer's job is that they have to do a little bit, not have to, but should know programming, game design itself, a little bit about music, texturing and all that stuff. That way they understand of what needs to be done. It doesn't mean they have to be perfect at it. They have to know exactly how to lead the team. And the issue is with so many of these teams we see is that these people are no longer leading the teams as they should. The only person this hasn't backfired for is Kojima, and that's because Kojima is a totalitarian. It's my vision. This is the way
we're not doing it.
I mean, famously, with Revengeance, he said his entire team were idiots, couldn't do it, and handed off the platinum.
Bailey, do you have any thoughts?
Um, not particularly about this subject, no. It's
Fair.
like,
This is something where if you're not like personally engaging or overthinking, then you know it's kind of it's a rabbit hole. It's an iceberg. It's an iceberg.
It's kind
where
of
we have the things that are on the surface, and then we have.
I
the
never
things
really thought about like the idea of, because usually, as Nate said, like if a developer, so like if a developer is like bought out or something, the idea of them not being changed is like usually always a good one, you know. Like you don't want like, and like I think this whole, and I think the Activision buyout is, I think, like the first, well, probably not the first, but like one of the first major instances of like, yeah, we want them to like change because of this now, you know.
Okay, so we are looking at wrapping up pretty shortly. So does anybody real quick have any closing thoughts on the state of Game Pass or the handling of the buyout? Bailey, do you have anything?
I think it's gonna, like, I think this is probably the biggest like gaming news we've had. Like, I think I don't know if it's like the biggest ever, but like really, really high up there. And I'm just
this is by far the biggest acquisition that's ever happened in the gaming space. Like, it's not the biggest company acquisition in terms of value, because that was you know, I think like $120 billion. But it's certainly the biggest that we have seen in terms of video games. This makes, I believe this makes Microsoft the third largest video game company in the world.
Like, ideally, I think like the best outcomes from all of this would be like Sony trying to like better their own services, Microsoft trying to like make, like, as we've talked about, like trying to make like Game Pass like a lot more user friendly now, you know. But I do think there is always the creeping fear that this was probably something they shouldn't have done, because it could have really like dreadful like dribbling effects from now on, like as you made the analogy with the bubble. Like, there could be a really bad crash down the line, and that's always a fear, you know.
Nate, do you have anything?
I'm gonna say this acquisition, I'm gonna be tentatively hopeful about it for now. I feel that eventually Game Pass would be a good thing. It just needs to be refined a little bit more. And I am thinking that this will encourage Sony, and let's just accept Nintendo, because Nintendo doesn't care. They do their own thing. They don't
have to care.
No,
they don't have to care.
Yeah, they don't have to care. They do their own thing, which is why I love them so much, is because, you know, Nintendo does what Nintendo does. But this will make waves, and that competition, I'm hoping, will start stepping up a little bit more, because we've been a little safe in the game space recently.
It's felt very stagnant over the past like generation or so, you know. So
yeah. So I'm hoping with these, especially with the Bethesda one, that Sony will be like, hey, we're gonna have to do this, this, and this, and you know, I think we're gonna see it with Spartacus. Honestly, I think Spartacus is gonna be a leap forward, and then hopefully, once our bubble does crash, we'll be able to pick up the remains.
And I mean, I think that's just kind of the thing, is like, we talked so much about Spartacus last week, but I don't know what Sony's move is here, because they don't want to do day and date releases, and they've reiterated that over and over and over again. So I have to wonder what their ultimate response to this is going to be, because they have to respond somehow. Their stock dropped by a massive amount that
like Jurassic amount.
It was like over $10 billion in the one day, and it's recovered for the most part since then, because, you know, people move on, and people, you know, swoop in when the shares are low so that they can buy them when they recover again. But this is something that is just going to be an ongoing story for the rest of the year as we find out more and more of what's happening. So that is going to be it for the Stray Pixels podcast this week. Hopefully next week we get something more fun to talk about. But we are the Stray Pixels. Follow us at noisypixel.net and on our Twitters that are going to be somewhere down there. As of right now, we are posting every single Tuesday. So we will see you guys next week for a much more fun discussion than the doom and gloom of this one. And with that, I'm Colin.
I'm Nate.
I'm Bailey.
We'll see you guys next time.
See ya.